Welcome back for the new installment, part 3 of my retrospective of the 6th console generation. Part 1 talked about the Sega Dreamcast, part 2 talked about the PS2, and this week we are talking about the Nintendo Gamecube. Released originally on, and I believe it was November of 2001. Now, just about a week after the original Xbox would be released, so it would be the last of the generation, which will be next week, will be the end for the 6th generation retrospective. Now, with the Nintendo GameCube, it is definitely uniquely designed, and you cannot mistake the GameCube for anything else. One, because of its interesting design. I personally like just the letters and style of the GameCube logo, as well as very nice and well designed cover, with of course 2 memory card ports. And yeah, these memory cards are relatively small compared to others, but hold 2 standard memory cards for up to 4 controllers, since there was a lot of multiplayer games. Specifically, you had a lot of sports games and other things, which would be interesting. Of course, on the bottom, you could remove these 2 plates, allowed you to hook up a device that would allow you to play Game Boy Advance games on it, which was nice. Though you also had to make sure you got it complete with the disc in order to run the software to do it. That today is going for a pretty penny. Like, if you're wanting the adapter to play Game Boy Advance on the GameCube, you're probably looking at $150 for the adapter. It's going for more than the console. But love it, and I always found quite interesting also with the whole handle to carry it around. It's just very unique. But one thing also that was good to help reduce issues like overheating, you had on one side a really good powerful fan, and then the other side just allowing heat to escape. So that is good. It was designed very good with keeping the console cooler so it wouldn't overheat, and then so it wouldn't of course crash, which is good because other consoles would definitely have an overheating issue on occasion. But the GameCube was actually designed, probably out of the 4 consoles of the 6th generation, it's probably the best well designed to deal with overheating issues. Better than the others, just the way it overall did the design of the controller. And I will say it is good how nice and compact the console actually is. That's one thing I actually have always give credit to this for, was that. And I always did like, now of course one of the interesting things most people would remember about this console was the fact it took mini discs. Also, hopefully you're enjoying the music in the background. I chose Wind Waker. Now, another thing, of course, best well known, remember, for the GameCube, was also the controller design. Definitely a very unique controller. It is arguably one of the best design controllers that Nintendo ever made. I would say, personally, there are probably 3 best design controllers are, at least the ones I've personally used anyways. I would have to say probably the Super Nintendo controller, the GameCube controller, and personally also I really like the Wii U Pro controller. I think is really nice and plays very well. Though I'd probably put it in 3rd place. For me, I'd say the GameCube controller is probably my 2nd favorite Nintendo controller of all time, with Super Nintendo still being my personal favorite. But it is good, it is unique, the fact you only have 3 buttons on the top But it is satisfying, just the sound, and I love the way it curves like this. It makes it perfect for your fingers. That is actually really good. But still find it weird that the C button is sort of designed like a actual joystick, though it's actually a C button. It's just weird. Plus the layout though of the buttons is unique, but it actually works really well, specifically with things like platformers. This is actually a really solid controller. Sadly, the D-pad is not the greatest. That's one of the flaws with the controller, is the D-pad, which makes it a little bit harder to play fighting games. Unfortunately, these controllers work perfectly for things like platformers and RPGs, but not so good for fighting games, unfortunately. But the joystick and stuff works really good for the most part, I think. And I like the texture on the top because it makes it easy to control and rotate the joystick. So I do appreciate that. I like it has a grip on it. Now, one thing about the GameCube, when it came out, arguably out of the four consoles of the generation, GameCube would come in third place, while unfortunately my dear beloved Dreamcast would come in last place. The GameCube would end up selling around 22-23 million units worldwide. Not great, but still not the worst. Now, it would be the worst selling home console from Nintendo until, of course, the Wii U. Um, and I think because of it not selling as much back in the day, I think that's why nowadays you see game prices skyrocketing for the GameCube. Though surprisingly, I'd say at least half the GameCube library is definitely going up quite a bit. Then there's stuff not so high in demand, which is why you can find some stuff for a very reasonable price range, but not a huge amount. Unfortunately, a lot of the good games are going to run you a decent amount of money unless you're smart and patient. But the GameCube as a whole is a great console in my opinion. It's one of the best. I would say if I had to rank right now, I'd probably put the GameCube in. It's kind of a seesaw for me for the GameCube, probably between second and third favorite console. First being the Switch. Though it's pretty close with the Super Nintendo for second. But the GameCube is very unique, very well executed for the most part, great controller, and the games. That is where this console specifically excels. I think better, I think overall the quality of titles, overall percentage wise, of its library, is probably the best Nintendo console of all time in quality titles. Though there are definitely quite a few people out will probably argue N64. Not as big a fan of the N64. Um, Now, the Super Nintendo, I definitely put up there pretty much neck and neck quality wise with the GameCube, but there's just some games on the GameCube that are just amazing. Now, right now, talk a little bit about some of them. Like, for instance, if you are a Sonic fan and a fan of game compilations, then this is actually a great console because, believe it or not, you got two really solid compilations for the GameCube. The first you would have would be the Sonic Mega Collection with 7 great games. I mean, you would have, which would come with Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3D Blast, Dr. Robotnik, Mean Bean Machine, and Sonic Spinning Ball. Not the biggest fan of Sonic Spinball, but I like it more than some people. Now, in my opinion, Dr. Robotnik Mean Bean Machine is probably one of the most underrated Sonic games. But this come from a big fan of Tetris and those type of games. So I admit there's a little bias here. But this, if you want just one collection of great, solid quality Sonic titles, this is definitely a good one. And price wise, this is still very reasonable. You can get this for probably 20 some bucks, no problem. You're given 7 pretty good quality titles. The some would say probably 6. But And then you have this one, which is definitely the little bit pricier one nowadays of the two collections. That being Sonic Gems Collection. Now, with Sonic Gems Collection, you would get three specific games in this collection. That is what I think is the main reason why this has become such a coveted collection by many Sonic fans. Now, you would get six bonus games, all classics from the Game Gear era. You would have Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which isn't really Sonic 2 from Genesis, but still, it's great. It's probably easily about the one of the better games on the handheld. Also, you get Sonic Spinball Game Gear version, Sonic the Hedgehog Triple Trouble, Sonic Drift 2, Tails, Sky Patrol, and Tails Adventures, which is cool that Tails actually got two games of himself, strictly on the Game Gear. But if you are a big fan, this is definitely something for, I feel, the more hardcore old school Sonic fans because of those Game Gear games. And the three main, really somewhat coveted, harder to get hold of games in this collection is probably the best route to go because it's far more expensive getting them on the Saturn and stuff. In total, the three main key games you get in this collection is Sonic Fighters. Yeah, a rare, not so well known Sonic fighting game. Also, you would get Sonic CD, which has definitely become, I think, one of the more sought after old school Sonic games. Now, there are people that think Sonic Spinball is not a good game. Specifically, yeah, I'm looking at you, Scoppa was. But I think it's a good game personally. It's not as great as some of the others like Sonic 2 and 3, but still a great game and somewhat underrated, I feel, in some opinions. And then you also get in this collection Sonic R, which is going for a pretty penny nowadays. And if you want to play basically these games on the Saturn, you have to get the Sonic Jam Collection, which is going to set you back between like $150 to $200 or more. While you can pick this up for, on average, probably about like $35 to $40 for the Sonic Gems Collection. Now, unless you're a real hardcore Sonic fan, I don't recommend it, but still, that's one thing I give to a GameCube. It is a great console for Sonic fans with these two compilations. Plus, you have Shadow the Hedgehog. You have like a better, like considered somewhat superior versions of Sonic Adventures 1 and Sonic Adventures 2 Battle. Next of stuff, you would also see some interesting and unique RPGs, like this one. Probably one of the most unique Final Fantasy games of all time. And that is Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the most underrated Final Fantasy games on home console of all time. Great soundtrack. The gameplay is very unique and different, to be fair. It is designed with the idea of having a four-party. Now, you can't really play with traditional, like, you can if you want to play with four controllers, or you can play with, like, four Game Boy / Game Boy Advance SPs with the attachment, plug it in like a controller if you want to. So you can play in two versions, but yeah, this is designed for up to four friends to play together at the same time, which is cool, the fact you have up to a four-player co-op mode, which is what makes this game so unique and different to any other Final Fantasy game of all time. That's one of the things I give a lot of credit to GameCube on, the fact it has very interesting and unique games to any other console. Also, if you are a big fan of, say, Pokemon, you have in my opinion, two of the best Pokemon games of all time were released on the GameCube. That being, first of all, one of my probably in my top 5 favorite GameCube games of all time, Pokemon Coliseum, which, as I've said before, has a pretty decent difficulty curve on occasion. And, of course, the more sought after nowadays, Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness. It is kind of weird how this one is going up slowly while this is skyrocketing right now. Why? I have no clue, but doesn't change the fact these are two of the best Pokemon games of all time. In my opinion, I'm not the most hardcore Pokemon fan, but these are games that got me originally. This was one of the games that sold me on originally picking up a GameCube, was because of Coliseum, which is a game I recommend if you've never played, do yourself a favor and try out Pokemon Coliseum. Also, if you were a platformer fan, you were in luck with two of the greatest platformers of all time. That being, first of all, the original classic Luigi's Mansion, which is arguably considered to be the best by quite a few people, and others will debate probably Luigi's Mansion 3. No one ever talks about 2 hardly ever. But for me, yeah, I only just recently got this, and I will say, so far playing some of the game, I understand why it's so beloved. And it is cool, and the fact is, this was also a launch title for the GameCube. So this was a heck of a title to launch with. A great, solid platformer. Then we have, in my opinion, probably one of the most criminally underrated Mario games of all time, and that being Super Mario Sunshine, which is easily in my top 5 favorite Sonic games, or like top 5 favorite Mario games of all time. Though for me, my favorite will always probably be Super Mario World, then Super Mario Odyssey. I would probably put actually Super Mario Sunshine in third place. Another game I really like in this series is Super Mario Land. In my opinion, it's criminally underrated. But yeah, if you've never actually played Super Mario Sunshine, get the game, try it. It's still not super insanely expensive yet, but it will the way things are going. But I love this game for the art style. It's just gorgeous to look at. I love the whole mechanics with the water, which makes definitely platforming very unique and different. The controls, in my opinion, are very well solid, executed very good. It is arguably, in my opinion, about the most free-filling Mario game of all time, even more than that of Odyssey. But that's just my opinion, keep in mind. And this is somewhat biased because I've been a fan of this game since I originally played it. Back in, I believe it was like around 2005, 2006 that I actually finally played Sunshine for the first time. And I was pretty much, I probably played that game non-stop until I actually beat it, and then occasionally would a couple times beat the game from beginning to end again. It is about the only real Mario game, in my opinion, with an actual solid narrative and storytelling, actual character growth, which you don't see a lot in Mario games. Now, you didn't have a lot of fighting games on the GameCube, but you did have some really good ones. You had some which are, in my opinion, way overpriced nowadays, like Mortal Kombat Deception, which is kind of crazy how much it's going for on average right now. It's going for like $60 plus. That's just ridiculous. Now, for me, if I'm going to recommend a fighting game for the GameCube, first I'm going to recommend Soul Calibur 2 just for the fact you can play with Link from Zelda in the game, and boy is he OP in this game. But the gameplay, the controller I actually think works really good. The joystick is actually really good to use in this game. This is one of the only fighting games that I feel actually use the joystick very well. So if you're gonna play, I recommend playing it more with the joystick than the D-pad. But that's just me. The other game which I finally recently re-got, which I will show again in the future in a future pickups list, that is, I also highly recommend Bloody Roar Primal Fury. Though you can get a somewhat superior version with that of Bloody Roar Extreme on the original Xbox, though there is one key difference between the two games. It's all CG cutscenes in the Xbox version. In the Primal Fury GameCube, instead of CG cutscenes, you get anime style cutscenes. I actually think the anime style actually has helped the game age better overall, in my opinion. But I think a lot of people are also gonna like the more anime cutscene aesthetic a lot more than they are going to like it, but this is arguably one of the, probably maybe the best fighting game on the GameCube. Well, it's between that and Soul Calibur 2, in my opinion, anyways. But for me, this is arguably also one of the best Bloody Roar games of all time. And if you don't have it, if you've never even played Bloody Roar, if you can get for a good price, pick up Primal Fury, because I highly recommend this game to anyone. You will love it. It plays great on the GameCube. And surprisingly, the GameCube controller works pretty good as well with the game, just like Soul Calibur. Now we're going to quickly stop off a sec with two games that specifically hold some memories for me, because these were two of the first three games I ever played on the GameCube. First, I'm going to talk about the third game I ever played on the GameCube, and that is, of course, Metroid Prime. And boy, did this game cause controversy when it was first announced and released as a first-person shooter. A lot of people weren't sure how the game was going to work, given it always been like a side-scroller 2D platformer. And yet, they killed it, and I arguably say, design-wise, this game actually still looks, for the most part, even graphically, really good, since you don't really see human faces and stuff, mostly backgrounds, aliens, plus Samus in, of course, her robotic suit. Because of that, graphically, it's made that game age a lot better than other games from the same time period. But this is arguably a definitive, I would consider, must-own game for the GameCube. If you're a GameCube collector or have thought about getting one, this is a must-buy, and it's still affordable. You can still get this game for like $20, believe it or not. So it's still very affordable, very good deal, and I do highly recommend it. And the fact if you can get this version, you get a special bonus demo disc with, of course, Metroid Prime Echoes demo. Next, quickly mention my very first game. This was the game that convinced me to originally buy a GameCube in the first place. And of course, that is Star Wars Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron 2. This was the first game I ever played demo at a kiosk at Babbage's. And I will never forget playing the first level in the game above the Death Star, of course, towards the end of Episode 4, A New Hope. This is such a great, solid game, and it has so many great missions that you can relive some of the greatest moments from Episodes 4 through 6. In my opinion, Rogue Squadron is one of the best Star Wars games of all time. At least up until I played I'm thinking of the Knights of the Old Republic games, this was probably my favorite Star Wars game. But yeah, for me, this was the first game I ever owned on the GameCube, and I'm definitely not sorry about that. This is one heck of a game to play. And if you are a Star Wars fan, I do recommend playing it, and it is still very affordable. Quickly mention a couple of other things before I get ready to cut this video, and that is Legend of Zelda. I'm currently waiting to get my hands on, which I won the other day auction. I'm waiting for in the mail. Once I get it, I'll have all the Zelda games for the GameCube. Total, there was 5 games released. The one I'm waiting for is called The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Master Edition, which is a higher difficulty version of Ocarina of Time with a few extra bonus pieces of content. It is definitely becoming a very sought after Zelda game, as is a few others like nowadays going for quite a bit. Luckily I picked up several years ago cheaper, and that is the promotional disc. This is a great collection of 4 games. Total, you get the 2 NES classics and 2 N64 classics. Unfortunately, for some reason, they don't put the Super, in my opinion, one of the greatest Zelda games of all time, sadly was left out. That would be Link to the Past from Super Nintendo, but you do get Zelda 1 and 2, and you get Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, though it is said Majora's Mask is not necessarily played great after recently playing 3DS version. Yeah, I get it, but this was the way I first played Majora's Mask, was on this a special combination disc. I never owned it on the N64, so this was how I played Majora's Mask for the first time ever. But nowadays it's starting to become harder to find. But if you get a chance, get it. This, as I said, GameCube is probably the best console of all time, in my opinion, for Zelda games. Because you have that special Master Edition, which has never been re released. This compilation has never been re released. Also, of course, you have the always beloved, recently finally got, which is becoming also a very looked for game, and that being The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures, which is a very interesting game, which does also allow you to plug up Game Boy Advance and play with it, which is actually rather cool. But this is probably one of the surprisingly more overlooked Zelda games, in my opinion, which is a shame because it's actually a lot of fun. It's a really good looking 2D Zelda game, in my opinion. Now, the other two, I'm sure no one is not familiar with. Of course, my number one favorite Zelda game of all time, Wind Waker. Which, by the way, is the music in the background you hear in this video is from the Wind Waker. In my opinion, is just a drop-dead gorgeous game, and because of using the cel-shaded art style, it's helped the game age a lot better than others. This is one of the only Zelda games I have actually beat multiple times. I have probably beat this game now like 4 or 5 times I've done full playthroughs of. It's that fun, that addictive. It's a game I choose not to play too much, and I prefer a wait like and replay it on occasionally every couple of years just so I can remember how much I love the game but not burn myself out on it. And then there's the now ridiculously skyrocketing, I don't know why, uh, Twilight Princess. Now, this game, I still love this for what it is, definitely, as a darker, more grim take on Zelda, very unique. Now, for me personally, it is probably my, I would say currently ranked, probably my third favorite Zelda game of all time. So, yeah, for me, the GameCube has two of my top 5 favorite Zelda games of all time. That with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. I would probably put Twilight Princess third place, Wind Waker first place. Second favorite Zelda game of all time, I would probably have to give to, honestly, Link to the Past, for me personally. But with that said, and the last couple of survival horror games. A couple of these I'll be showing in a special Halloween edition in the future of pickups. But first up, I want to quickly mention briefly, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked, underrated of the Resident Evil Biohazard franchise, Resident Evil Zero. The, of course, very unique game that allows you to switch back and forth at any time between two separate characters. One, of course, a familiar character from the original Resident Evil. Now, in my opinion, and by the way, you can still get this game dirt cheap. I got this game about a year ago for like $10. So yeah, you can still get this game very reasonably priced. It's not skyrocketed like some of the other Resident Evil games. And it is unique also the fact it is a 2-disc Resident Evil game, but that is no surprise given how freaking small GameCube games are. But for me, this is a great game, and with the ability to switch back and forth between characters, adds a lot more and also allows you to do special type of puzzles. And this game is awesome. I love it, the fact it still feels like the old traditional, of course, at that time, Resident Evil games. Not as much action oriented, more focused on the horror aspect, which I appreciate, though the gameplay is really solid. It plays a little bit more like a modern Resident Evil, but still keeps the old school feel and look. Now, the other two, quickly mentioned briefly, is a somewhat overlooked game, and I don't know why, called Geist. This is a very unique game I played and had years back. I'm just glad to recently pick this game back up again while it's still reasonably priced. You can get this game on average probably $30 or maybe a little less than 30. It is a very unique game where the fact is you can possess basically any people and turn them against other people, which is a really unique concept for a horror aspect game. It's not completely survival horror, but it definitely has a lot of horror aspects, but it definitely plays very much not your traditional survival horror game. But that gives it such a unique feel and look, plus the fact this has never been re released on modern consoles, which sucks. The other game I'm quickly mentioning is another game that has not been re released, which also kind of sucks because it's getting very pricey now. And that is, in my opinion, one of the most unique, interesting horror games of all time, that being Eternal Darkness. Sanity's Requiem. Now, this game allows you to choose 3 different paths of special abilities you can do throughout the game. You have to beat the game 3 times each time with each special ability, which unlocks a 4th special ability you can do in the game, which makes you basically completely overpowering. And I like the fact how if you do stuff earlier on in selected chapters, like rescue specific people in the game, it can unlock and get you special weapons and things later on in the game. Plus, you can definitely tell this game was heavily inspired by H.P. Lovecraft because of definitely references to different creatures from Lovecraft's universe. Not specifically Cthulhu, but other beings from the mythos. But that's all I'm going to say. Don't want to mention a full spoiler. If you are curious to see a full gameplay through or anything of this game, check out the completionist, his video on this. But I recommend at least checking out on YouTube like the cinematics and clips. But seriously, it's a game, in my opinion, you have to experience firsthand to really understand the greatness of this game and why I think it is probably the best survival horror game on the Gamecube, without a shadow of a doubt. With that said, this is it for part 3 of the 6 console generation retrospective. Hopefully, you enjoyed part 3 on the Gamecube. Stay tuned for next weekend when I do the original Xbox, which I'm looking forward to because I have a lot of fondness for that specific console. But as I mentioned, for me, the GameCube goes back and forth between being my second and third favorite Nintendo console of all time. But with that said, I'll see you on